Welcome to Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. Amen, amen, amen. And we have been on a series now for quite a few months. As a matter of fact, as I look back over it, because I think this is part 15 today, it's the longest series that I have ever preached in over 25 years of ministry. But we're also in a different time than we've ever been in over 25 years of ministry. We've never seen in our modern world what is currently in and on the earth right now. But God had me begin this thing months ago, before the virus or before the plague had even become well known. God knew what was coming, and he says, I want you to do a series on the plagues of Egypt. There were only 10 plagues of Egypt, and today is the 9th plague, but even before that, I began with some plagues that were not obvious and that were not in the immediate 10. And you can go to brothersoftheword.com and listen to the entire series, because every one of the plagues of old relates to our current situation even today. And today we're dealing with the plagues of Egypt, and it's the plague of darkness. And I subtitled this, In a Dark Place. And here in the 10th chapter of the book of Exodus, beginning at the 21st verse, the NIV version, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward the sky, so that darkness will spread over Egypt, darkness that can be felt. Now that's another level of darkness. Light, by its very nature, you cannot feel. Now you can feel heat, and normally if you walk out in the sun, you don't feel the light. What you feel is the heat from the sun. If you put your hand under a lamp, you don't feel the light. What you feel is the heat from the bulb. Light and darkness is something that you cannot physically or biologically feel. But God says, look, stretch out your hand toward the sky, and I'm going to bring a darkness on this land, a darkness that can be felt. And there are different levels of darkness. The darkest place that I have ever physically been in is a place called Ruby Falls. We actually took the church there on one of our yearly outings, and we went to Chattanooga, and we rode the Chattanooga choo-choo and all of that, but we went to a place called Ruby Falls. Ruby Falls is an underground cave, and you catch an elevator and you go several hundred feet down into the earth, into the bowels of the earth itself. And then you walk about 30 minutes and you get to this, you walk through these caves, through these narrow passages, and you finally get to this open cavern. And in the open cavern, there is a fall of water that drops from about 100 feet above, and it drops down to this pool of water. They have all these colored lights. It's just beautiful. But there in the middle of it, as the guide was talking, he said, now everybody get prepared. And they've turned out the lights. So here you are, several hundred feet below ground. And when they've turned out all of the lights, it's the deepest dark that I've ever experienced. I mean, literally, when they say you can't see your hand in front of your face, literally, you could see absolutely nothing. It was just total pitch. Because normally, even here at night, it's always some light coming from the stars or from the moon or from street lights or something. Even if you're out in the woods, and I've stayed nights in the woods in a tent, it's still not that dark. You can still see. But there in that cave was the first time I'd ever been in a place where it was so dark, there was no light. You could see nothing. Not even an inch in front of your nose could you see. It was darkness that, as God said, you almost could feel. And yet, here the Egyptians were in a place for 3 whole days of darkness that they could feel. In verse 22, so Moses stretched out his hand towards the sky, and total darkness covered all of Egypt for 3 days. No one could see anyone else or leave his place for 3 days. That was a true sheltering place. Not only could you not leave your house, but see, if everything went just total, can you just imagine it? Suppose everything just went total dark. The equivalent, you see, darkness there is a natural fear that we have that's almost innate. Technically speaking, we only are born with 2 fears, and those 2 innate fears is the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Those are the only 2 that we're technically born with, but somewhere along the path, we get scared of the dark. And there's something about it. Stuff just it's not as scary in the daytime as it. You hear something creak in your house in the daytime, it's not that big deal. But way up in the middle of the night and something go to creaking, it's the same creak. But the difference is the darkness. And can you imagine 3 days and you can see nothing? Not only could they not leave the house, I'm not sure how they could even get around in the house. See, I'm not sure you could even find your bathroom if you just had no light at all. And can you imagine absolute total darkness? See, of our 5 senses, if someone gave you the choice and they said, look, we're going to take away all of your senses and you can only keep 1 sense, almost everyone would choose the sense of sight. You'd lose your hearing. You'd lose your sense of touch. You'd lose your sense of taste. You'd lose your sense of smell. If there was 1 sense that you would hate to lose above all of the other senses, it would be the sense of sight. But here, for 3 days, the Egyptians could absolutely see nothing. And see, even at times when our electricity goes out, in the olden days, the other generation, they didn't say the power went out. They would say the lights went out. And even here in Egypt, all of the people were without lights. All of the people were in the middle of the darkness. And everybody was in the dark. But the people of Israel, they had light. Now, see, that's another problem. James and I, we live on the same street. And every now and then we'll have a power outage. And when we have a power outage, one of us will call the other and we'll ask the other one question. Exactly. You got any lights? And see, as long as everybody out, then we breathe a sigh of relief. But if I call James and ask him, does he have any light? He said, yeah, my light's on. And he almost sometimes says it with a gloat, as if to say, I got lights over here. I got power. You over there in the dark, but I got lights here. So it doubles the problem when you in the dark and somebody else has light. So here all of the Egyptians were in a darkness that's so deep that you could feel. And sometimes when we have walked away from God, we get in a dark place. We get in a place that pulls that spirit. And that's why when you're with God, even when stuff around you, when power has gone out, when stuff around, just like what is happening with this pandemic, you have never seen me. I have not had the least bit of concern, the least bit of depression, not the least bit of worry. Because I know who controls it. I know who has his hands on the switch. So even when other folk are in what appears to be darkness, when they're in a dark place, none of the stuff has ever bothered me. And you've heard me talk about this when I've gone through some stuff. Even when I was in the hospital for my crash over in Greece, I was just as happy as I could be. By all natural logic, I should have been in a dark place. And see, the Israelis, they had light, but the Egyptians were in the dark. Sometimes that thing is a figurative thing because it means when you're walking with God. And when you're walking with God, you say, how did you have, and see, they had oil lamps back in that day. They had candles back in that day. It meant the oil lamps wouldn't work, the candles wouldn't work. There was no light at all. When you strike a match, they didn't have matches, but still, if they had struck a match or flicked a lighter, nothing would light. But yet, other folk in the other land had light. And see, you'll see this sometimes in the middle of dark times. And I believe even though we've had this pandemic, I don't think this is the darkest time that's coming. I think we got some worse stuff coming on the land than what has happened so far. But you will still have, even in the middle of worse stuff coming on the land, you're going to have some people in darkness and you're going to have some people with light. And that's because the light is not just external. See, it's a darkness that you can feel. See, with the virus, the vast majority of people have had no physical effects from this virus, but they felt it. And sometimes the thing that they feel most is just fear. You've had no physical effects, not so much as a sniffle. Most of the people have had no physical effects from this thing, but they felt it. And they felt it with fear. They felt it with concern. They felt it with all of the trepidation and all of the stuff that the news, and they sat there just almost in total constriction. It's sometimes a darkness that you can feel, but yet there's on the other extreme. When I talk with my mother, I have to make sure that I pull my top up on my car. Because when I talk with my mother will sometimes, she can hear if I'm in the car. She said, "Boy, do you have your top down?" And if it's over 50 degrees and not raining, I have my top down. And my mother said, "You need to put that top up because they're putting this stuff in the atmosphere." They put it in the atmosphere. Now, Mama may have a spiritual knowledge of that's beyond the normal. And I learned just to put my top up than to sit there and debate it with Mama, because I just can't convince my mama that it's not in the atmosphere. So it's just easier for me to put the top up when I call my mother. So when my mother asks me, "Boy, you got that top down?" "No, Mama, top up." And then it ends that line of discussion about it's in the atmosphere. But you see, darkness, and when we are in darkness, I started out with a little bit of a diatribe before the sermon began, just about getting a pet. There are two things that will actually help you when you're in darkness of soul. And sometimes, there was a book called The Dark Tea Time of the Soul. And sometimes we get in a dark place sometimes. And it happens to everybody. Even with my boys on yesterday when we had our talk, we actually had a talk about what do you do sometimes when you go through a dark time. Because everybody's going to have it sooner or later. It's just no two ways about it. Everybody sooner or later, you're going to have the lights go out in your spirit. And for some reason, you're going to feel depressed and you feel dark. What do you do about that thing? One of the first things you can do actually practically is just really get out in the light. That's why there's a condition psychologically called seasonal affective disorder. And this happens in the wintertime when the sun is not out. And basically, when you have a lowering of sunlight during the day, you have an increase in depression because there's something about light, about physical light itself, that lifts depression. So one of the first things you do is just get out in the sun. That's why I don't drive with my top down to keep from getting depressed, but it does make me happy. It's just something about it, just feeling the sun just beaming down on my skin. It increases vitamin D, all this kind of stuff, all kind of other nutrients are activated with that. But there's something about just walking in the light. And that thing has a physical and a spiritual counterpart. There's something about just walking in the light. You see, one of the things that causes depression is when you do stuff that you can't let out in the light. And you can about tell whether the stuff is acceptable, whether it's uplifting or not, simply by whether you can tell your mom about it. If you can't tell your mom about it, if you can't tell your husband or your wife about it, if you don't want your children to find out about it, more likely this stuff you're trying to keep in the dark. And anything that we try to keep in the dark, anything that is deserving of the dark, because some things absolutely do grow best in the dark. But usually the things that grow best in the dark, usually they are unhealthy for us physically and they're unhealthy for us spiritually. All of the good stuff for you grows in the light. All of your fruits and your vegetables, all that stuff, it grows in the light. But when you look at mold and fungi and moss, all this stuff grows in the dark. And that's why when you sometimes open up your cabinet way back in the dark, you got all this mess growing in the dark. Mess grows in the dark. So there's something about it when we get in the light itself. It changes our spirit. That's why Jesus says, I am the light of the world. So there's a difference between light and darkness, both physically and spiritually. So when God brought darkness upon the land of Egypt, there were multiple reasons of why he did that. One of the biggest reasons why he did that, because Egypt's main god that they worshiped was Amun-Ra. And Amun-Ra is the sun god. And this was their most powerful god. And every one of the plagues, when you actually go into the Egyptian deities, every one of the plagues corresponded to a deity that they worshiped. But Ra was the most powerful of the deities. And God told Pharaoh, and he basically told all of the people of Egypt, you're worshiping the sun god. I'll show you who's in control of the sun. See, that's sometimes when we worship some stuff, and this stuff hadn't changed. As I go through the Bible multiple times, I see how all of the time the children of Israel, what they would do, they would always turn to other gods. And I was saying to myself, how did these people constantly leave the God they'd seen do all this? How could they? And see, right when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, right when they came out of Egypt, wasn't long after they'd been in the wilderness for just a little while, Moses up on the mountain, the leader gone, here they come having Aaron make them a golden calf so they could worship the golden calf. Sometimes I can't even stretch my mind to understand how did the people see they saw all these plagues. They saw when they had light and all of the other land of Egypt was in darkness. They saw the Red Sea parted. They saw the pillar of fire and the cloud leading them. They saw all this stuff. So how did they still go? The minute the leader goes up on the mountain for a few days, how did they go and make a golden calf that they knew could neither see, hear, feel, or act? And you have to wonder, how do folk do that? Same way we do it. There's not a person in this place has not seen God deliver you from something you knew you shouldn't have been delivered from. There's nobody in who's not felt God's power and his miraculous force and the love. And there's nobody who hadn't felt that. But then how do we go and worship a car? How do we go and worship a job? How do we go and worship a house? How do we go and worship a hat? And we will sometimes put more focus, more emphasis on things that can neither hear nor speak. They have no power. But the same way the children of Israel did it back then is the same way we do this now. And when that happens, we walk and move into the darkness because those gods can bring no light. They'll only bring destruction when we go and worship them. So here we had darkness upon the land of Egypt for a total of 3 days. And God was showing the people, I am the one and only God. Ra has no power. I can shut the light off, and Ra cannot turn it back on. And in 10:24 of Exodus, then Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, go worship the Lord. Even your women and children may go with you. Only leave your flocks and your herds behind. Oftentimes we try to bargain with God. See, God has told Pharaoh up front, you got to let my folk go and all this stuff. And Pharaoh said, look, I let the folk go. I even let the kids go, but you got to leave all your flocks behind. Moses said, no. And Moses says, he says an interesting thing in verse 26. Our livestock too must go with us. Not a hoof is to be left behind. Not a hoof. Not 1 foot of any animal that's ours shall be left behind. Some of us try to bargain with God. You know, Lord, I'm going to do this if you can just let me do this. I'm going to keep 9 of your 10 commandments, Lord, but I want to keep this thing right here that I got. I don't want to give that up. I do all the other. I just don't want to give that up, Lord. How many of us have just bargained with God? You know, say, Lord, if you just get me through this, yeah, I'm going to do it. How many of us just bargain? We don't want to fully, we want to hold stuff back from God. Lord, I'll let all the other stuff go, Lord, but I just want to keep this one woman on the side right here. If I can just do that, Lord, I'm with you. How many of us try to bargain with God? And yet God will say, look, with your whole mind, with your whole heart, with your whole spirit, you got to serve me with all you got. Lord, I'll give you 8%, but I'm not going to give you 10. Let me just keep this other 2% extra. How many of us have bargained with God like Pharaoh was trying to bargain with? And Moses said, no, God said, not 1 hoof. Not 1 hoof will be left. See, until we are truly ready to give God all, and that's a point of sacrifice that's very difficult. You should love the Lord thy God with all. That's a point of sacrifice. It's very difficult for most of us to get to. Goes to the story that we've heard 100 times before about the man who was telling the girl, I love you, sweetheart. I would climb the highest mountain for you. I would swim the deepest ocean. I would walk the widest desert for you. My love for you knows no bounds. And there's nothing I will not do for you. And I will see you tonight if it don't rain. See, sometimes we will tell God what we will do, but when it comes down to it, God says not 1 hoof will be left behind. I want all of your devotion. I want you to put me first, not second. And sometimes when it gets to that point, we're like Pharaoh, and we try to hold some things back. And God says, not 1 hoof shall be left behind. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. Pharaoh said to Moses, get out of my sight, and make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die. And Moses says, just as you say, I will never appear before you again. And that's the leading into the last plague of the plagues of Egypt. Matthew 4:16 says, the people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. And when we have that light, no matter what darkness is around us, we've got light on the inside. Because the true light is on the inside. You don't have to worry about it. And even in the darkness, and darkness will occur in all of our lives. And if it doesn't fall on us, it's going to fall on somebody we care about. Darkness is just a part of the cycle of nature. And sometimes you need that. I've learned my best and greatest lessons in darkness. Not when stuff is just all going smooth. I've learned my best lessons in darkness. When I couldn't, see, one thing about the darkness is you can't see your way out. You can't see the door. You don't know which way to go. You don't know even what's there. You ever been in that kind of, you don't know, Lord, I don't know how to get out of this thing. I don't know what to do. I can't see my way out. I'm in darkness. And sometimes God can speak to us best and get our best attention in the middle of the night. Oh, you do some praying in the middle of the night when stuff go to creaking. So in the darkness, God can speak to us sometimes best. In the shadow of death, God can sometimes speak to us best and clearest because he has our full undivided attention. Because we can see nothing else but him. When we're up and when we're strong, when we're healthy, when we got plenty of money, when everything is going great, when everybody's acting right, you in the bright sunlight. And everything around you is going great. Sometimes you feel like, Lord, I done this on my own. I don't need you right now. But in the middle of the night, when stuff goes bump, we change. And all of us will have that darkness. And often the light prepares you for the darkness so that when it does come, you're not left blind. And you can see your way clearly, even when you can't see it clearly. See, I've had situations, once I came into the light, I had situations I couldn't see my way clearly, but I knew where to go because I knew who was holding my hand. And I knew who was with me. So the path never bothered me. And when you walk in the light, even when there is darkness around you, it will not bother you. But if you walk in darkness, you will become terrified of the night. And we have to remember that God made the seasons. It is God who made the day and the night. And when you understand that, you walk with a different kind of light on the inside of you. And that's where we want to get to. Where it doesn't matter what kind of candle power. See, man's light has changed throughout the years. It began with just fire. Then we were able to make candles and oil lamps. And finally, when Edison created the light bulb after 10,000 tries, we had the tungsten light bulb. And now we've gone to LED lighting. But it doesn't matter what kind of light man makes. There is no substitute for the light of the world. There is no substitute for the light of the world. And when you've got the light of the world on the inside of you, you can light up any room. You know, people have that ability. You know, they say some people, when they come into a room, they light up the room. And some people, when they come into a room, they like kind of cast a shadow on the room. When you've got Jesus on the inside of you, when you walk into a room, you light up the room because you got the true light on the inside of you. Darkness is a part of the cycle of life. It really is. And this world is going to go through those cycles just like it does every 24 hours. It's going to go through those cycles every few years. The economy going to get dark. You get dark with the clouds of war. You get terrorism. You're going to get disease. You're going to have all this stuff that's coming. And Jesus told you that was coming. You're going to have wars and rumors of wars. You're going to have earthquakes in diverse places. You're going to have all this stuff coming. They're talking about the earth heating up. It's getting closer to hell. Yeah. That's all that climate change is. It's getting hotter and getting closer to the temperature of hell. But none of that stuff should bother you if you've got the true light on the inside. And you're going to see more and more and more of this stuff. So I'm telling you, like Jesus told you, yeah, you're going to have all this stuff, and it's going to increase. You've never seen a pandemic like this. You've never seen a situation where everybody is out scared. You've never seen this before. You're going to see more and more and more of this, but you're going to have two groups, those in darkness and those in the light. And you need to be one of the ones walking in the light. You need to be the ones where when people see you, and see right now you can't see folk even smiling because they got a mask on. But they ought to be able to feel your smile. They ought to be able to feel it in your voice. How you doing? I'm doing excellent. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. You can be covered up in the mask and folk can feel the vibration underneath your voice. They can tell that you got something that this virus has not affected. And they can tell it by your countenance. They can tell it by how you talk. And they'll be able to tell it by the God you serve. I mean by the God you serve. And when we're serving the right God, not Amun-Ra, when you're serving the right God, he will keep your light on. I wish we had somebody who could sing as we close out this little light of mine. Because in a day of darkness, we need to be the lights that shine. For those of you watching on television, I thank you for joining us. I thank you for joining us on the stream or whether you're watching electronically months or years later. The cycles of light and darkness will always continue just like the seasons. But we never have to be in the dark as long as we have the true light that's with us. You can go to brothersoftheword.com and you can listen to the Plagues of Egypt, the entire series, or share it with a friend absolutely free of charge. We thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. This is Pastor Nathaniel, and I hope that you truly enjoyed this message and that it blesses your life. If you would like to help support this ministry, we ask that you do two things. First, bow your heads for 10 seconds and ask God, Lord, what shall I give? When he answers you, go to iwanttogive.com and support this ministry. Let's bow our heads for just 10 seconds. Amen. If you heard the Lord's voice, go to iwanttogive.com. This is Pastor Nathaniel. Be blessed.